Hello, Captain Graham here with something a little different this week. Not a performance, but a talk on my perspectives about Baroque Continuo performance practice on the harpsichord. I'll intersperse this with music clips of some of my ensemble performances and rehearsals over the years, featuring Bach, Vivaldi, Handel, and C.P. Bach. I'm sure most viewers are aware that for much of the Baroque era, ensemble music of every shape was accompanied by a harpsichord, lute theorbo, organ, or some other chordal instrument. A harpsichord continuo player, just taking the harpsichord as an example, would play the main cello bass line in the left hand and improvise in the right hand chords and melodies that reflect the flow of the music, the musical structure, the interweaving of melodic lines, and of course the correct harmonies. Here's a clip from Bach Brandenburg Concerto No. 2 performance in which I had to 100% make up a continuo part myself. Instruments and voices will be typically weaving in and out of each other with independent parts, while the continuo is the glue that provides the harmonic substance, rhythmic vitality with that ever-present tinkling of the harpsichord. I compare it to the drums in a modern pop or rock group almost, because the continuo is the heartbeat of the music. At its most extreme, say in a Corelli violin sonata or a Bach or Handel aria or recitative, the composer may write a solo instrument or solo singer with just a bass line. And in these cases, obviously, an accompanying continuo part has to be added to fill in the harmonies. It'd be a little bare otherwise. For example, in this Vivaldi guitar concerto in D, the solo episodes are lightly scored with just cello and continuo accompanying, and I had to devise a harpsichord accompaniment that would not overshadow such a soft-voiced instrument as the guitar. Sometimes, but not always, there is a series of numbers written below the bass notes called figured bass, and these guide you how to add the correct harmonies. For example, a 6 means you have an interval of a sixth above the bass, what we would call in modern harmony a first inversion. 6/4 means a sixth and a fourth above the bass note, which would be what we would call a second inversion. 4/2 has the seventh in the bass, and so on. No number usually means the bass note is the tonic of the chord. When there are no figures at all indicated, such as in Vivaldi concertos, I go through the score and put in my own, a laborious process taking me hours, but short of reading the score as I go, which would be a lot of page turns, how would I know the precise harmonies otherwise? As you can imagine, reading figured or unfigured Baroque basses to come up with a full and appropriate continuo part is a highly specialized skill set. You are going back to the composer and not simply performing his work, but partnering with him in composing it. You as a continuo player are essentially completing the work, actually trying to enhance it, or at least not ruin it. Here's an example of a concert rehearsal in my flat of Vivaldi's world-famous Winter from the Four Seasons. performers of the time had the skill set to be able to come up with these continuo realizations on the fly. No doubt there are many superb modern performers with such skills too. I learned figured bass and continuo realization as part of my music degree at Oxford University. I'm no Christopher Hogwood or Trevor Pinnock, as I need to work hard, but I get the job done, usually. Now, depending on the popularity of the piece, there may be a continuo part that's been written out by a modern editor. In my experience, the continuo parts written out by modern editors are never 100% correct or ideal. At their worst, they can be unplayable or completely unsuitable for the piece. This is more the case with older realizations. So who's to say the realization is inappropriate? Well, it depends on personal taste and skill level of the player. My approach to doing continuo for a new piece is to sometimes use a realized part as a basis to which I'll add or subtract from. I use trial and error. I can pre-plan practicing on my own, but only by rehearsing with other instruments, or the other instruments, can I finally realize what I'm going to actually play. Usually what I'm doing is quite discreet and trying to enhance the flow of the music. Sometimes I might try something more elaborate, as in this aria from Handel's opera, Giulio Cesare. It was Bach that really liberated the harpsichord from the shadowy subsidiary role of providing an improvised continuo accompaniment. In Brandenburg Concerto No. 5, the movement opens with the harpsichord in continuo accompaniment mode, with Bach writing a figured bass line only. Then at the end of the first tutti, the harpsichord bursts in with a full solo along with the flute and violin. It's thought by many that, along with possibly Handel's organ concerto, this was the world's first keyboard concerto. The harpsichord in Brandenburg 5 increasingly takes over the movement before, or I should say dominates the movement, before ending with the infamous long cadenza, for want of a better word, while all the other instruments sit and fidget and listen for a long time. So the Mount Everest of harpsichord concertos. Bach, of course, later wrote down concertos for 1, 2, 3 and arranged one for 4 harpsichords from Vivaldi. Perhaps all of them were arranged from previous concertos. As a side point, in the harpsichord concerto in A, a set of parts exists in Bach's hand. Beside the solo harpsichord part, there's a separate figured bass part for another harpsichord, indicating that even in the harpsichord concertos, it seems there was a separate continuo role. Here is a run-through I did for an online recording during the lockdown. Just as the harpsichord emerged as a soloist in late Baroque concertos, so Bach increasingly liberated the instrument from its accompaniment role in sonatas. He wrote sonatas for violin, flute, and viola da gamba, as far as we know, with an obligato harpsichord part. Some of these still feature short passages for figured bass, but mostly the parts are integral and fully written out in dialogue with the other instrument. Here's the B minor flute sonata. Occasionally, Bach's written out part resembles what he might have done in his own improvised continuo realization practice, as in the slow movement of the B minor flute sonata. Most often you'll find composers such as Bach or his sons mixing in passages of traditional figured bass with obligato work in the harpsichord, as in this clip from a CPE Bach flute sonata. The continuo role survived the Baroque era. There were reports of Haydn conducting his symphonies from the piano, and in London even wrote a little flourish for the piano in Symphony No. 98 in B flat. Mozart similarly conducted from the keyboard, and in his piano concertos seems to add a continuo role, since he indicates in the tutti the bass notes in the piano part. But new ways of writing music during the classical era, with winds providing supporting harmonies, were a death knell for the continuo and the harpsichord in general, which, as I said, was a sort of harmonic glue as well as rhythm. No longer was a chord-playing instrument needed to smooth out the flow of the texture and pep up the rhythm. Composers were writing a new music, and the harpsichord slowly became extinct until being revived in the early 20th century. Now, rather a long musical lecture this week. I hope it gave some insight into the loss of the harpsichord player, or the harpsichord continuo player. I'd be happy to answer your questions in the comments, and I'll try to list the pieces quoted in my blurb. Here to End is a complete slow movement from the trio sonata from Bach's musical offering. I hope you can hear the subtle, largely improvised harpsichord accompaniment I did as enhancing the instrumental texture. Do let me know what you think. Bye for now. Thank you.